Good afternoon. This session is about closing the gap between theory and implementation, and implicit in that is that there is a gap between the theory of smart cities and the implementation of smart cities. I think we can extend that a little bit further, not purely the theory and the implementation, but the gap between our leading smart cities and other cities. And so I'm very interested in exploring today, with your help, what we can do and what lessons we can learn from those cities that are out in front to encourage other cities to join. And I think there's a whole lot that needs to be unpicked in answering that question. Firstly, though, I'd like to introduce the panel and give them the opportunity to say a little bit about their perspective. It probably won't be lost on you if you've studied the programme that we have representatives from a leading smart city, two leading companies in this space, and also a leading university. I was tempted to say a smart university, a smart city, and smart companies, but I've avoided that. So if I could just go from my right across the panel and ask you first, Jeff, to say a little bit about your background and the work you do in the city of Milton Keynes, and your perspective on whether there is indeed a gap between the theory of the potential of smart cities and the technology, and actually the implementation of that technology and smart city innovation and smart city approaches.
Okay, thanks, Trevor. So I'm Jeff Snelson. I'm Director of Strategy at Milton Keynes Council. And I run a whole load of services within the council. I do things like corporate policy, communications, economic development, inward investment. But in this context, I lead our Future City programme. So I tend to get involved in large-scale projects which are about looking ahead to the future of the city and understanding the capabilities which we might need to continue to be economically successful. And our context is we've been the fastest growing UK city and economy. I mean, we build about 1% of the UK's house building total each year. A lot of our focus is on enabling success and dealing with pressure on infrastructure from growth and so on. And I mean, it's interesting in this context as well that I also am running a project called, we've got a Futures project working with the Government Office for Science. I think someone made reference to it this morning. So, I mean, I'm not a technologist. My role is primarily about knowing lots of different people and knowing where to pull on the expertise that we might need to address particular problems. So I know about the problems we need to solve and how to make connections with the right people, I guess, including Enrico on my right, who you'll hear from, who leads one of our core projects, which is the MK Smart Data Hub project. Alongside that, we've got citywide projects that cover Internet of Things. You've heard about our driverless cars project. We've got a whole load of projects around low carbon mobility and so on. So I'd like to think quite an advanced suite of projects that all seek to integrate at a city scale. So that's a bit about me. I can talk about gaps between implementation now, Trevor, if you'd...
Please have a go, yes.
Yeah, well, but it's one of those things where it's a bit of yes and a bit of no. So there's no sort of clean answer to this. And I guess there's always a frustration when you're at the leading edge of something, as I guess most people in this room are when it comes to this, that you don't understand more about the business models to be able to implement them. But it's worth reflecting on the fact that there are already many smart city solutions that are out there and working very well. So just in our own case, I mean, we've got a very well advanced electric charging infrastructure across the city that we started putting in place about 4 or 5 years ago, like lots of people. But we've just put in 50 rapid chargers across the city so that you're never more than about 500 metres from something you can plug into and get up to a full charge within about 20 minutes. And we've also got an electric bus service that runs on induction charging, where you park over a plate and you get a charge. So, and that's been shown to be very competitive with diesel. So there are solutions out there that are well established and are starting to work. But I guess a lot of the discussion in these sorts of arenas is around Internet of Things and understanding the business models and the value from data and better connectivity. And I guess there's a couple of observations there. One is that we've got a number of projects where we've understood how data can add to the efficiency a service model, and you can start to see where you can develop the business case and start expanding that. So a very simple example is we've got a project with a satellite applications catapult that uses high-resolution satellite imagery and interleaves that with information about planning permissions. So you can start to use it for planning enforcement and so on. So we can see how that gives us as a city and a council utility, and how you could start to develop a business model off that. More uncertain is a piece of work we're doing on a city motion map, which is a project which is based in the MK Smart sort of data hub, and seeks to build a real-time picture of vehicle and pedestrian movement across the city, integrate that with timetables, integrate that with journey planning and so on, so that, and ultimately payment. And it's very difficult until you've actually brought the data together and started working on that to understand the value of the data and how you might start pricing that or charging that or providing a service. You've got a fair degree of faith that there is something there that is going to produce value. And you've got to step into that and have a degree of confidence it's going to work. But importantly, I think work as a collective. I mean, we heard about collaboration this morning. Many of these projects are still too risky for any one party to undertake on their own. So there's a shared interest in collaboration. So I think there's as with any such sort of development of technology, there's a whole range of different stages at which technology is available. And I think realistically, with Internet of Things, we're still quite a long way away, I think, from understanding and delivering the real benefits from that.
Thank you. And Enrico, now you're from a university, so I guess the assumption is that you're developing the theory, but there's a gap in the deployment and the adoption of the technology that you're working on. So could you say a little bit about your background and your involvement in smart cities?
I'm Enrico Motta. I'm from the Nogi Media Institute of the Open University. So in fact, I cannot resist commenting on the Smart University Lab, because actually the Open University is really the Smart University. And I think it's a good role model, I would say, for the whole Smart City agenda, because the Open University was enabled by technology development. And of course, the original vision by Wilson was all about, the television and the new technology that will enable higher education to reach a broader the broader masses. But the key thing at the end of the day is not the technology, but is the vision. So the Open University was enabled by technology, but the reason why it has been so successful is now, as the largest university in the UK, was because the people who founded the university really had a very clear vision of what education in the 20th century and the 21st century will be like. And I think the same thing really applies to Smart City. And when we talk about the gap between theory and implementation, well, actually, I probably don't have 36 minutes and 58 seconds. I mean, there's a lot to say about that, because there are so many different facets to this gap. But certainly one element that is an important aspect of this gap is the scale. I think the UK really has a lot of initiatives that are really world-leading, and I like to think, actually, I don't like to think, I think that in Milton Keynes we have one of these, not just projects, but also the whole set of projects which really puts Milton Keynes at the leading edge of smart cities in UK and internationally. But at the same time, and I think this was picked up by some people in panels before, there is an element of scale that is still missing. We are still really talking about Milton Keynes, Bristol, London, Glasgow, to be at the forefront. But I don't see exactly how this gap between going from, let's say, atomic solutions which are leading edge but deployed in one particular area, are going to scale up to the entire country. So I think certainly that at the very, very high level abstraction, that certainly there is a gap there. More specific, if I have another minute other more specific challenges, apart from some of the technological challenges that Jeff was talking about to do really with the infrastructure, I will say is the old business of data ownership and privacy and security, etc. So certainly the experience in MK Smart has been on the one hand, I think the project is doing very well. We're being very successful. But on the other hand, actually, we face some obstacles that maybe we had not really understood very well. And these were not technological obstacles. They were all obstacles to do with legislative frameworks, with privacy issues. So just to give a concrete example, of course, nowadays, pretty much everything that can be, that could be private is private. And of course, I don't want to sound like somebody from the China Communist Party, but this certainly, the moment you talk about smart cities and you talk about integrating systems, poses new challenges because, of course, this massive distributed data ownership means that you have to put together a lot of different stakeholders, some of which really find it difficult to understand why they should be engaged in this agenda. So that's a challenge that I think goes beyond the technology. Of course, there are interoperability issues, but there is, I think there is a need for a better framework to understand the whole business of providing data and using data. And the analog to that from the point of view of the individual citizen, but also from the point of view of companies, is privacy. Some companies we work with say, yeah, we would love to give you all the data we have because, we're really excited about the kind of things we are talking about. But we don't really own this data. The data are really owned by our customers. And it is not completely clear to them to what extent, how exactly manage this tension between the fact that they cannot really violate the privacy of their customers, while at the same time engaging with projects like us to provide better solutions for their customer. So is this, and of course, for example, the insurances, earlier there was a speaker from the insurance world. They've done quite well with, essentially you give data, you will reduce your payments. But that's quite easy because it's a one-to-one relation. Sometimes in these smart cities, the relation is kind of one-to-n, and I think the problem is more difficult. Okay, I'll stop here.
Thank you. Brian, very different perspective now from the industry. So once again, if you could say a little bit about your perspective and what you do, and then whether you see that there's an issue around the implementation, really.
So I'm Brian McGuigan. I'm part of Silver Spring Network's European team focused on smart cities. I know many of the people in the room, and you're, I guess, familiar with Silver Spring Networks. For those that aren't, I'll give a kind of brief summary. So we provide flexible connectivity and data platforms for utilities and cities, with the aim of letting them connect millions of devices and enabling hundreds of different applications. The company is about 12 years old and has really grown up in parallel to the evolution of the smart grid market around the world. And in that time, we've become a global leader in energy networking, working in everything from smart metering through substation monitoring, electric vehicle management, distributed renewables, in-home engagement with consumers. And in total, we've connected over 23 million homes and businesses and have a huge amount of data flowing through our systems to help those utility customers. About 4 years ago, we brought that knowledge and technology to the cities market, which are in many ways looking to tackle many of the same challenges around integrating systems and modernizing services. And now we work with many leading cities around the world, including Copenhagen, Paris, close to the home in Bristol, Glasgow, and work across a range of applications with them, including traffic management, street lighting, local energy initiatives, smart parking. And overall, we have networks deployed in over 100 cities around the world, connecting applications from over 150 different partners through open standards. So I guess on the question of do we see a gap between the theory and the implementation, I think one consideration there is that the bar and the expectation for what a smart city is continues to rise. If we go back 2 or 3 years ago, cities might well claim victory in kind of a smart sense from having a series of discrete programs which have vertical sensor-based applications or perhaps modernize a few services. But I think now the leading cities are recognizing what kind of true integration in terms of data and wider services can do, both for improving systems and also changing how they operate as a local authority. And so I think I think even the leading cities, when they measure themselves against what's possible, they would say there's a huge way to go. And I think there's also been a recognition that that this isn't a kind of short-term activity, a phase that people go through to smarten their cities and then it's done. It was actually mentioned earlier on, I think perhaps by someone from Bristol, who said, you know, they'll be doing this for the rest of his life and then probably, you know, the generations to come. And I think that mindset is something that's kind of coming through now and is changing how cities are approaching this. I think there are certain barriers that we see. I think as the ambition has raised, it's probably uncovered or kind of highlighted the challenges that sit within councils to achieve this utopian view of system integration across all of their systems, whether it's through organizational structure, procurement mechanisms, outsourcing contracts, or funding. And I think we see that varies somewhat between the specific use cases. So I think for something like autonomous vehicles, which was mentioned earlier on, which is something so new and disruptive, that clearly achieves a very, or can only be achieved with a very kind of broad view of stakeholders. I think we see other examples which are perhaps modernizing existing services, struggling to achieve that really broad view of collaboration of what's possible. And to talk about a very specific one, to kind of put that in context, you know, street lighting or intelligent street lighting is something that's happening at scale rapidly around the world, largely driven through the drop in cost and increased efficiency of LED luminaires that present huge potential savings for local authorities. And so the business case there started with energy saving, but projects around the world have now shown that street lighting can not just deliver energy saving, it can have huge operational benefits. It can become an asset for the police department to improve public safety. It can be used to help promote commercial growth. It can be used to increase the use of cycling with associated health benefits. And the underlying infrastructure you need to enable smart lighting can actually then be reused to assist other parts of connected infrastructure, whether it's from a wireless connectivity perspective or a software platform for managing tens of thousands of devices. So the potential is there and it's been proven, but we see regularly in procurements that the funding is really based around that singular use case of energy saving, and the procurement struggle to identify or quantify the value that can be achieved more broadly. And I think we see that the range there varies by use case. So that being said, I think we are at an exciting point, and you know, this isn't a new challenge. Many cities are tackling this head on, and in fact, probably more people in the room here are here because they recognize the potential, and many of the speakers today have talked about their initiatives. In terms of customers we are working with, or cities we're working with, Copenhagen recognized this potential, and when they approached their smart lighting program, which was initially driven about a carbon reduction target, they want to be carbon neutral by 2025, they recognized this extended potential and have put in place mechanisms to work more effectively with industry to identify ways of getting more value, and restructured the council itself to have better ways of sharing knowledge between different departments. And I think the final thought I would say on this is we're seeing a growing adoption of open systems, and I think many cities in the UK have now made a kind of clear stance on their position for open systems, which is again a change. We do see a few of the kind of large established providers still perhaps clinging to the more turnkey smart city vision that kind of started things off. But there's a really kind of striking move towards a more ecosystem open model where it's recognized that systems will not sit still or be tied to a singular provider, and that they'll grow in functionality over the course of their life.
Thank you. Caroline, same question.
Hello, thank you very much, Trevor. I'm Caroline Gorski, and I head up business development for Telefonica in the UK across the Internet of Things, and most of you will probably know Telefonica as O2, which was the name that's up on the sponsor sheet, so that's the connection between the two. It's very interesting. When I first took this role on, which was only in March of this year, just gone, it's a very exciting job thinking about new possibilities, new developments in the Internet of Things, but it's also slightly terrifying because the Internet of Things is so broad and so enormous that it really defies definition right now. It's a bit like cloud computing felt about 5 years ago. So the first thing we did was we came and took a little bit of time to try and think about this marketplace and try and understand what the Internet of Things really meant for O2 in the UK and how that applied to the areas where we feel we've got credibility and we can talk powerfully. So I suppose in the context of trying to see whether there's a gap between the vision and the ambition for smart cities and the actual delivery of them, I mean, I'd kind of call that back in some ways to trying to understand what we're defining as our intended outcomes. When I think about the Internet of Things, I think about you could take a network-led definition of the Internet of Things, which is basically about extending the networks across which you drive processes that you already have. So it's an efficiency gains model. You know, it goes back to the point that you were making, Brian, that many of the business cases in the initial conversation are about taking a process that already exists and delivering that process more efficiently. And that's essentially about saving money or about extending the reach of a process. Or sometimes you can take a device-led definition of the Internet of Things, so you can look at all of the new technological possibilities that come through semiconductor change, that come through extending battery life, that come through looking at miniaturization, that come through the possibilities of having a wider range of temperature capability for sensors, that come from packetization, being able to use better compression algorithms to actually send more data over channels. And suddenly you can get very excited about the possibility that technological change can bring in terms of the devices that you're using to create completely new processes that were never possible before. And that's amazing. I mean, there are guys out there who are miniaturizing radio transmitters so that you can stick them on the back of a bee, which is brilliant and actually really, really important in the sense that tracking bee pollination patterns is critical for the success of US agricultural systems in a way that we have only really started to grasp in the last 5 years. And here's the definition that we tend to use, or we're using in the work that Telefonica and O2 are doing. You can take a user experience-led definition of the Internet of Things. You can think about the way that creating an integrated network of data generates the possibility for users to have radically new experiences, and that those experiences are adaptive and that they are contextual, that they bring together pieces of information, whether they are machine-generated or human-generated pieces of information that previously might have not existed at all or existed in silos. And by doing that, they create a completely new set of experiences. Because I guess my message would be, in some senses, I think the biggest gap between theory and implementation we have today is that we talk about smart cities, but I'm not sure we're always talking about smart citizens. And the reality is, until we are in a position where we can demonstrate in a transformational context the changes to user experience that will come from living in UK PLC, where smart cities are the norm, we will struggle to make those business cases. We will struggle to get the kind of stakeholder engagement across this very, very broad set of data repositories. And we won't get the traction that I think we need. So that would be my view.
Thank you. And I mean, I'm just interested, I think in two things. One is whether the discussions you have with cities is changing. Very interested, Brian, in terms of what the first line of that conversation is when you pick up the phone. Is it, hello, I want to buy a street lighting system, or is it, hello, I want to buy a smart city system? And from a city point of view, and I think there's no question that Milton Keynes are one of the leading smart cities, do they get a sense that the dialogue with business is changing? I mean, do businesses come to you with a different set of solutions than they did even in the recent past? So, Brian, if I could ask you to kick off, are the conversations with cities changing? Should we take encouragement from that?
Yeah, I think it is. I think there's a growing awareness of what's possible and kind of how broadly cities should think. I think awareness of aspects, you know, the importance of scalability, robust security and other things is also evolving as cities are recognising how they can have a coherent view across not just individual silos. Because I'd say it's in just the last year that really everyone has recognised that the siloed nature is perhaps the primary barrier for achieving this kind of wider system integration. So I think there are still, cities generally have specific problems to solve. There's a lot of consistency in the types of challenges cities have, but what varies every time is the order they either want to or must tackle those based on historical investments, based on political pressure, based on other factors. And so it's clear that there's no smart city playbook, actually. I think you asked, do people say, okay, we want a smart city offer? I think people now kind of want to engage on, here's our challenges, and this is number one, what do you think we should do? And in line with this kind of move to a much more partner-based solution, then we as a provider will not say, okay, here's how you fix that. It will be, we'll bring other partners with us that we've worked with, or try and explore who else they should bring in, and then it's a much more collaborative approach. And I think it has to be, and that will continue.
And Jeff, your point of view?
Yeah, I think about maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, we had lots of very unproductive discussions because people would turn up, often very big sort of multinational companies, and they'd have a big solution in a box, and they'd come along and say, look, we've got this fantastic thing that can solve all your problems. Now, tell me what your problems are. And I've got a team of people in the health vertical or the street lighting vertical or whatever, and I can deploy them. And the next stage would be me sat in a room with about 5 people around there, all with these vertical solutions, or with trying to convince me that it was something worth buying. And so that led to a fair amount of frustration. But more recently, the best kind of conversations, and I think it goes to Brian's point about this sort of ecosystem and so on, are companies that come in, and it's much more of a cultural fit in terms of preparedness to spend time together and understand the place, help us understand the solution, the opportunity. And generally my favourite thing is if the company's prepared to make a bit of an investment and to help us demo or work through some of the solutions. And from their point of view, I think what I try to offer is to make it easy for them to connect with the council, because companies tell me that they approach a council and they don't know whether they should be going to the IT department or this place or that. And even if it is that place, they go there, and sometimes the person there doesn't have the breadth of responsibility or authority across the council to be able to broker introductions to the right people. So that connectivity between people with prepared to spend a bit of time and capacity working with us, and from the city side being prepared and able to help them access the people who are at the coalface with dealing with the problem and really understand the issue and understand where the value might be, and brokering those conversations, that's when it starts to work.
And then Enrico was talking about one of the challenges being scalability, and I think we all recognise that there's a lot of projects and a lot of pilots and a lot of demonstrators. And it's something that resonates with me, is that actually this may be a legitimate stage that we're going through, but at some point this actually has to become systemic within a city. And Milton Keynes is probably further ahead than most, but nonetheless you've mentioned projects and what works is people coming in with a bit of funding to demonstrate, and I absolutely recognise that, and many people will. But how do you get beyond, and let's assume you are, so how do other cities get beyond just working around pilots which come to an end, or projects which come to an end, and actually getting to a stage that they can be scaled across Milton Keynes or cities and across the UK?
I think that's the nub of it, isn't it? And I guess there's a couple of answers to that. One is that local authorities, even though we're cash-strapped, we do have the ability and the desire to invest in solutions that save us money or deliver value for citizens. So there is an opportunity there if there is an understandable business model. So that scalability, I mean, it's not that different to lots of other sort of products that people come and sell you. It's just that they're a very advanced stage in terms of their development. So there is always a route through to actually deployment if there's a clear value proposition. I think there's the second point I'd make, and I mean, we've heard mention already today the Innovate UK IoT competition, and I mean, we've happily been shortlisted for that, and shortlisted in a collaboration with our friends from Leeds and Cambridge. And what we've sought to do in constructing that collaboration and that bid is to work with partners such as Leeds, who've got a very strong health and social care programme that we don't have. And in our case, we've got a very strong transportation programme, which I think Leeds can draw on, and working between cities and to help share the R&D load across cities. So I think more of that collaboration, which I think the Innovate UK competition has helped sort of foster, and maybe government should think about how it could do and enable a little bit more of that, because we're all beavering away doing lots of good work in lots of places, but we're probably too often making too many of the same mistakes rather than really leveraging what the experience and the abilities that we do have as a country, I guess.
And I'll open up to the floor in just a moment, but one of the issues for me is a lack of consensus about what the KPIs are around smart cities. And if anybody in the audience has got an answer to this, then I think the panel will probably be interested to hear. But from the industry, university and city perspective, what are the core KPIs? I mean, how do we know when we've arrived? And I accept the point that it's a journey and that we will never get to an end state. But without those KPIs, we're surely going to struggle. Enrico?
Well, for me, at the end of the day, it's really about the big challenges. I mean, we all love, the little app that tells you where is the nearest toilet or the nearest mailbox. But at the end of the day, and this is why actually it's great really to be based in Milton Keynes and to work with Jeff and his colleagues, because Milton Keynes there is a very strong future city agenda, which is driven by the big challenges. Milton Keynes is in a water-stressed area, which of course somebody like me who comes from southern Italy came as a big surprise, because I feel it rains every day. But actually, we don't really have enough water, and certainly the projections are pretty difficult. That with the planned growth of Milton Keynes, within easily 25 years, there will be serious water issues. So how we make sure that the growth of Milton Keynes is sustainable with respect to water resources? How to make sure that we become sustainable with respect to energy? Mobility is another big issue for a city like Milton Keynes. Traditionally, we didn't have congestion because of the big layout grid, American style. Now we are starting to have congestion, but at the same time, also going from A to B, if you don't have a car, is a challenge on a council of Los Angeles-like grid. So for me, these are really the key performance indicators. Of course, you can also look at technology. What is the infrastructure you have in the city, the fast broadband, sensor networks. So you can have some technology indicators, but at the end of the day, if you're not really looking at the overall quality of life of the citizen, then I think it's not really worth it, I would say. Okay. We go back to the vision thing.
Just before we go to the floor, Caroline, any thoughts on KPIs?
One of the biggest challenges, I think, in delivering successful projects, whether in the smart cities context actually or in the broader IoT space, is the process of delivering a successful project is often as much about serendipity as it is about planned output results. So sometimes you have no idea of the output gains that you're going to achieve from a project until you actually start running the project. It creates enormous difficulty in being able to do comparative studies between different pieces of work, because one instance of smart street lighting may well have an output in crime reduction or in, as you pointed out before, Brian, the uptake of cycling as a healthcare outcome, which is completely different from a smart lighting deployment in another area, which is actually about being able to reduce the number of minutes per day that we're actually using the energy base to deliver that service. So trying to find a single set of KPIs, actually I would be concerned that that would create more limitations than benefits. What I do think is fundamentally important as a success measure for smart cities is the scale of impact of transformation on the lives of the people who live in that city. And fundamentally that has to be about what things in that city don't work for its population today. Whether that's access to affordable housing, whether that's being able to feel safe when you walk around, whether that's being able to park, whether that's being able to have an integrated and joined up transport system, whatever it is, there will be key citizen pain related issues, and fundamentally it has to be about the transformational ability to deliver services which address those problems.
That's a really good point and a really good time to hand over to the audience. Any questions for the panel, please? Thank you.
Hi, Mike Howell from Imtech. I'd just like to point out that I think we do need some form of KPIs in place, because there are many disparate systems available, certainly in local authorities. I think, as somebody pointed out, are working just on their own. And I think if we could start to measure the connectivity between those two systems, is a great KPI to start to kickstart local authorities in thinking in a different way. You mentioned street lighting earlier on, smart street lighting. If you can link smart street lighting with measurement of vehicle flow, that's becoming very smart. Then you're raising and lowering lighting levels. What's the panel's thoughts on that, at least as a stepping stone?
I like the idea of being able to measure the exponential potential of an underlying network, data network, as a success factor for a smart city program. So I don't remember the name, you'll have to forgive me, but there was a bunch of work done about 10 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, published in the Harvard Business Review, which looked at the net beneficial effect of adding more nodes to an integrated network. And you see that, much as with Moore's law, it's an exponential beneficial increase. So measuring the interconnectedness between the data silos across a city and using that as a metric to indicate how ready or capable that city might be for delivering transformational services, I think is a very valid point. I'm not sure I would limit it to a specific set of functional services. I think I would probably be looking at it in a more abstract fashion.
Yeah, and I think finding the right metrics, as you say, is important there in trying to measure, let's say, infrastructure reuse or efficient use of investment. I think another KPI that cities should try and establish is some measure of the process that they're moving through. There's been a lot of talk today from speakers around how their cities are putting in place a common vision that's perhaps flowing down, defining certain key attributes, whether from a CIO or CTO or some other position that's trying to create consistency across procurements. And I think finding a way to measure that is important, because cities will continue to improve their systems in an unstructured way. You know, some of those will be planned and strategic, others will happen through pressure at the time or at the end of a contract. And so, you know, finding a way to ensure that those principles are being applied and then iterate the process, I think, is something that will be important.
Okay, there's a few questions on this side, and we'll come that side. Graham, I can see there, and there was another gentleman that I've lost who was behind you in a moment.
Thank you. Graham Coakley from Urban DNA. This is a really important question, Trevor. The one that's on the screen, not mine. But I'd like the panel's views on something. So I looked at the question, I wrote down 6 things, and as a result of the conversation, I added 2 more to it. And then I said 8 things is way too many. So there are 3 things that I think, and I'd like to get the panel's views on this, are the most important. And the first is leadership, brave leadership. I've heard a little tickle of that around trying to get silos to work together, but if you don't get that fixed, then that's not going to work. The second, in my view, is about business models and funding, and that's critical to move us away from seeking government grants. And the third is about the willingness of cities to collaborate to create scale. And I waited a long time, and then Jeff mentioned something about the IO2 competition as a means by which we could actually try and change the way the market operates, because the way it operates at the moment is dysfunctional. So I'd love the panel's view on those three things. I've got more, but I think those are the interconnected and really most important things that are going to shift the market so that we do actually close that gap. And if they don't want to tackle that, I've got a little question, which is there a player, a sector, is there a player that will help from the private sector? So the big technology companies have tried and struggle, so who might succeed in engaging the cities? Thank you.
Yeah, answers on a postcard, please. So Graham's 3 points, that implicit in that is that there is a challenge in terms of closing the gap. That leadership, new business models backed with funding and a willingness of cities to create, to collaborate to create scale. Your views quickly, please. And the answer yes is not entirely permissible. Yes, but is okay.
So very quickly, I mean, I completely agree on leadership. Funnily enough, on Monday we launched the first version of the Data Hub in Milton Keynes in a big event with all sorts of VIPs, etc. And I gave a 1 minute speech which was is about leadership. This would not have happened in Milton Keynes if there weren't people like Jeff Snelson, if there weren't people like the executives at the Open University and other key stakeholders prepared to take some risks and really drive this agenda forward. So yeah, without leadership, you don't go anywhere. So I completely agree with that. But the business models and funding, I think it's more than 1 second discussion. But as we were saying earlier, you need to have there has to be a national level vision for where this country wants to be in 10 years, and it cannot just be only left up to leaders like Jeff to drive this vision. And I think this is also related to your third point about collaboration between cities. I think a lot can be done bottom up, but also you need a top-down intervention to create a framework where things can prosper.
Jeff?
Yeah, I never liked the concept of brave leadership because it implies that you're doing something so stupid you're liable to be sacked. So it's like asking a politician to be brave and knowing that they're going to lose an election. But I think there's this notion of leadership, I'm sure sort of knowing you, Graham, that you'd subscribe to, is it's about the sort of collective leadership, and it's about people working together to share risk and collaborate. And I would say that, something that neither Enrique and I have mentioned so far is the other major pillar in our collaboration in Milton Keynes is BT, who as a company, I think have worked with us in a pretty brave way from what I can see in terms of they backed some of this technology, and they've backed their relationship with us with cash and time to work with us to share that risk. So I just thought I'd better give them a name check because they've been absolutely instrumental in working with us. And I say that I do think that collaboration is absolutely at the heart of things, and it's the sort of thing that plays across into cities as well. So I don't think it's any accident that the people and the cities that are doing well tend to have visible leaders who you see at events like this and actually spend time with other people, learning about what's possible and learning whether there are opportunities to work together. So, there's a combination of, I guess, sometimes personality types, but also a preparedness to spend time together.
And Graham's final point, just very quickly, is there another commercial player that can show leadership here?
I think your second question is the telling one there, to be honest. So you asked a question about business models, or you raised the point that there's a gap in terms of being able to deliver business models. I'm minded, when you asked that question, I'm minded to think about the scale of user experience transformation that has been delivered by commercial sector players like Google, like Facebook, like Amazon. And those transformations have been staggering. And in many instances, they've been built on hugely speculative business models for which there didn't appear to be any kind of direct revenue-based return, but which the stock markets were prepared to ascribe value to in terms of the share valuations of those organisations. I think one of the challenges in the smart city context is we're not talking about amorphous digital assets. We're not talking about things which don't exist. We're absolutely talking about things which do exist, very radically exist, physically exist. They're baked into concrete. They're up in lights. They are the way that I take my kids to school. They are big, meaty, challenging issues. And for me, the biggest gap in understanding how to build business models which will allow commercial players to do more of the work BT is talking about is about understanding the value of data.
Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to get at least one more question. Jen, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Trevor. I think the conversation around citizens at the heart of this is absolutely there, and I think the conversation that links to why isn't this getting to scale is partly because citizens aren't really asking for this stuff, and I think there's that pull through, that at scale pull through from citizens is because we haven't done a good enough job of whetting their appetite. And when we talk about who's missing from this discussion and what the UK is good at, maybe it's Pixar, maybe we need to get better at telling the story in a really intuitive way and engaging the creative industries perhaps in doing that. And I think when I look at some of the work that we do, for example, in Singapore around what is the day in the life of for a silver generation pensioner, what is the day in the life of a working mum who's also got elderly parents or whatever, how do these interventions change that? It's not a technology skill set, it's ethnographic, it's social, deep understanding of that side of things. And I guess what we're missing at the moment might be that, both that social ethnographic skill set and that storytelling capability.
I couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely.
Thank you. And I think, sorry, I think we really have run out of time. That, I think, is a really good point to close on. And I think Graham is quite right that this is an important issue. It's not just this issue of closing the gap between theory and implementation. It's about ensuring that there isn't a growing gap between our leading cities and the rest of our cities. And I think that we've teased out some key areas that we need to be looking at and ensure that we don't just keep celebrating the remarkable work that some of our cities are doing. I'd like you to join me in thanking our panel for their contribution today.